There have been two types of offenses that have been in the Super Bowl since 2016. The West Coast offense, which is ran by McVay, Shanahan, Andy Reid, and the spread offense with multiple tight ends, which is also ran by Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, Josh McDaniels. Brian Callahan with the Bengals, wide zone, yak, yards after catch guy, and is considered a great schemer. Shane Steichen uses Air Coryell with heavy motion, creating vertical explosive plays. Doug Peterson's offense is described as using multiple tight ends, forcing the defense to step up, and then when the moment strikes, hit them deep, utilizing under center, along with shotgun formations, pre-snap movements, and a solid mix of run and pass plays and play action. Josh McDaniels is described as many pre-snap and full field reads and trying to create mismatches with pre-snap motion. Gary Kubiak is described as a version West Coast offense zone run scheme that gave way to play action passes, and Mike Shula is a run heavy. The West Coast offense is described as devised for accurate but relatively weak arms, short high percentage passes. Bill Walsh installed the modified version with the 49ers, winning 3 Super Bowls with Joe Montana. George Seifert used the system and won 2 Super Bowls with the 49ers. Paul Hackett helped the 49ers Super Bowl. Hackett taught the system to Mike McCarthy, who won a Super Bowl with the Packers. Holmgren taught John Gruden, who won a Super Bowl with the Bucks. Andy Reid learned from Holmgren and has won 3 Super Bowls with the Chiefs. Reid's former assistants John Harbaugh and Doug Peterson have both won Super Bowls. Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak both use the system, as well as Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, and Sean McVay. What is the Coryell offense? Requires defenses to defend the entire field. Passing is based on rhythm and timing, and coaching the system required a lot of repetition. Coryell used motion to limit jamming, used motion to determine zone or man coverage. Offense did not have any set formations. Passing were thrown to a spot before the receiver got there. Each receiver had 2 to 3 options depending on coverage. Throwing the deep pass was the first option on each play. Coryell offense was a combination of deep mid passes with power running. The offense relies on patterns that combine stretch the field, and pass protection is critical to success. Strong inside run game, ability to strike deep, and great deal of mid-range passing to tight end, wide receiver, and back. The Coryell offense introduced the concept of the tight end that can run wide receiver type routes. Despite the popularity of the Air Coryell offense, Don Coryell himself actually never won a Super Bowl. He never even went to the Super Bowl. However, one of his disciples, Joe Gibbs, won 3 using the Air Coryell offense with the Redskins. He had an O-line named the Hogs. That consisted of left guard Russ Grimes, center Jeff Bostic, left tackle Joe Jacoby, right tackle George Stark, guard Fred Dean, and tight ends Don Warren and Rick Walker. In 1983, the Redskins averaged second most yards per carry at 4.2. Redskins beat the Dolphins, whose strength was rushing the ball but had second to last passing attack in the league. Joe Gibbs was the O-line coach for San Diego State in 1964, where he started out, and then he became assistant coach for the Chargers in 79 to 80 under Don Coryell. Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. The consistent players in those 3 Super Bowls were Jeff Bostic, Russ Grimm, Joe Jacoby, and Don Warren. Andy Reid was really successful with the Philadelphia Eagles. However, he was never able to win the Super Bowl with them. He lost in the NFC Championship game 4 times and lost to the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl once. It wasn't until he got Mahomes that he was able to make it to the Super Bowl 4 out of the past 5 years, winning it 3 times. But what's unique about that situation is that he has been able to merge a spread offense with a West Coast offense, considering that Patrick Mahomes used an air raid offense with Cliff Kingsbury at Texas Tech. Andy Reid has been adaptable to the strengths of the offense. The years they had Tyreek Hill, they were able to push the ball down the field effectively. But this past year, not having reliable deep threats, they had to rely more on short passes, which also helped them win. In trying to figure out which type of offenses dominated the NFL, I was posed with an answer: defense wins championships. And so did a little research on that, and this article by theperspective.com says that football stats prove differently. The author's deeper look into statistics contradicts this claim. They assert that 38 out of the 45 Super Bowls have been won by a top 10 defense, and 22 have been won by a top 3 defense. Meanwhile, 38 Super Bowls have been won by a top 10 offense, and 20 were won by a top 3 offense. So if you widen the sample size, the differences are marginal if they even exist. Another Reddit post stated that first, it's rare for a team to even make the Super Bowl without being a top 10 on both sides of the ball. There were only 6 of 20 teams in the past 10 years to have a unit ranked below 10 and get there, and the only offense to win not in the top 10 was the 2015 Broncos. Second, 8 out of the 10 winners had a higher ranked defense in the matchup, but only 3 of the 10 winners had a defense ranked above their own offense. Third, the higher ranked offense only won 4 of the last 10, but only 1 of the last 10 had an offense ranked outside the top 8. So while being lower ranked than their opponents, still very good. So while this shows you don't need to have the best defense to win, you better make sure you have the better defense in the matchup. And the person below that responded with, offense wins championships, bad defenses lose them. Another article by the Bruins sportsanalytics.com stated that I looked at the top 5 offenses and defenses in each season and determined the percentage of each that made the playoffs. Since 2003, 85% of the league's top 5 offenses each season have made the playoffs, compared to only 79% of the league's top 5 defenses. Therefore, over the past 20 years, having a top 5 defense is not a better indicator of a playoff berth than having a top 5 offense. The average offensive ranking of the past 20 Super Bowl champions is 8.4, with the average defensive ranking being 8.2. This implies that Super Bowl winners in the past 20 years do not have a significantly higher defensive ranking than offensive ranking. It's also worth noting that 4 of the last 20 Super Bowl champions have had the top-ranked defense, while only 1 has had the top-ranked offense. The average combined offensive and defensive ranking of Super Bowl winning teams is 16.6. Considering the offensive lines in the Super Bowl, 14 of 24 Super Bowl teams have had a top 10 O-line. 11 of the 15 top 10 O-line rank scored 20-plus points. 7 of the 15 top 10 O-line rank scored 30-plus points. 8 of 24 Super Bowl teams had a top 5 O-line, and 6 of 9 top 5 O-line scored 30-plus points or more. The exception being Baltimore in 2013, Seattle in 2014, but I took those teams out because they scored special team or defensive touchdowns. So the only 2 exceptions to that rule is the 27 New England Patriots and the 2019 Kansas City Chiefs. But the Kansas City Chiefs had Tyreek Hill, and that was the year that Mahomes nearly had to come out of the game because of his ankle. And the Patriots in that 2017 Super Bowl game probably had the best fourth quarter comeback in history. Being that I'm a Chargers fan, I like to relate this all back to the Chargers. So looking at Greg Roman and how he did, as well as Jim Harbaugh, how they did with the 49ers from 2011 to 2014. During the regular season, the passing and rushing defense from 2011 to 2014 were top 5 best team in rush EPA per play, as well as drop back EPA per play. In the playoffs, that number was good in terms of rush EPA per play, but dropped to average in drop back EPA per play. Passing and rushing efficiency from 11 to 2014 for the Niners was just slightly above average in both rush and drop back EPA per play, and that's excluding playoffs. Passing and rushing efficiency from 2015 to 2016 for Greg Roman and the Buffalo Bills, he had a below average drop back EPA per play, but one of the second best team in terms of rush EPA per play. If you look at the passing and rushing efficiency 2019 to 2022, excluding playoffs, just regular season, Greg Roman with the Ravens, he had a slightly above average drop back EPA per play, but best team in terms of rush EPA per play. And if you look at the Chargers, they had below average rush EPA per play during Herbert's time and a slightly above average drop back EPA per play.